Hello everyone. So I just finished, I guess, day one of. It's actually technically day three, but it's the first day I'm playing, so it's day one for me, I guess. I played two matches for the Atlantis Chess Invitational, Open Invitational 2022, and I played against Pop Up and Isaiah. I will. I should have already released my live commentary and my thought processes of those games. But here I want to sort of go over more closely one of the games that I played today. So it's not going to be like a game of the day recap kind of deal. And for me, the game of the day is definitely this last game against Isaiah. It was a very wild attacking blunderfest, which is very fun. Obviously, I could have played a lot more objectively and a lot more solidly and won slowly that way. But yeah, it's very clear that my calculation skills and my awareness is still not there yet. I'm still very rusty at the moment, and it's only by playing games like these that I'll be able to get back into the groove, kind of deal. So here is I open with e4. Previously, I played the Eliokin, and Isaiah didn't seem to know the theory, and I was able to get a win after that. But since I'm up 2-0, I decided to play something different. I decided to go for e5 instead, maybe try and test what an opening that Isaiah normally plays, something like that. So Isaiah goes for the center game. I call this a scotch in my live reaction because it's pretty much similar, very, very similar. Um, it can be very aggressive, I guess. So normal is to take, very principled. After queen to d4, you can attack it with the knight, so you gain a tempo. Queen goes back. I was expecting something like this in the game to better support the center, but obviously queen all the way to d1 should be fine as well. Here I just develop my knights. I play very principally, pinning my knight. I unpin it, and then I decide so also developing the knight very natural. I guess instead I should have played something like bishop to b4, transposing into something like a four knight scotch instead, where I'm more familiar with the position and there are less risks. Instead, I decided to be more confrontational. I decided to play h6, rerouting back bishop to a stronger diagonal. I decided to play d6, creating a bad dark square bishop, but this is sort of a more I don't want you to interfere with my development. I'm just going to passively develop my own, and I'm going to go attack afterwards. So that was my approach. So we see here bishop to b5 pinning my other knight, but I'm not worried about that. In fact, I very welcome b takes c5 so that I can support my center push in the middle game. Here I just simply develop my bishop. I develop the queen, preparing to queenside castle. And here I thought of maybe playing queen to d7 and preparing to queenside castle myself, but then it would be a little bit dangerous with e5, as is a very common theme in these sort of positions. I don't know why it is with the center game and like the scotch. Whenever I try to create imbalances, whenever I try to play in an attacking manner, I always suffer. I guess it's also because black is sucker to move, and then with lesser space, more cram kind of deal, and then with the center game or the scotch, the pawns are off the board very quickly, and white can accelerate development, I guess. So I think maybe I need to revise my approach against the scotch for more stronger players. Against weaker players, I think it's still okay to just play a bit more passively and then lash out afterwards. Anyway, here I castle, getting out the pin so that I'm not that afraid of e5 anymore. We see queenside castles. Now my queen is still very under pressure, so this is still very much on the cards. I start to poke the bishop around. Here, more principle, I guess, is to just trade, maybe. Trade and move my queen, something like that. But I wanted to attack, so I decided to go with b5, and after the trade, this here is a very double-edged position. I want to get my pawns out and about and my knights to active squares to pressure the queen side, and white wants to push e5 at some point, and isolate my pieces from protecting my king. So e5 is played now. Um, more the correct way to play would be actually to play knight to d5, um, but I didn't really want to trade and open up my queen here in the center. So instead, I decided to play more passively. I decided to play knight to e8, which is actually a mistake because it looks like I'm shielding my king by moving my pieces back, but this actually exposes my light squares because I no longer have a light square bishop. I'm going to trade it off, and now my pieces actually control all the dark squares. You see, all my pieces are on dark squares, controlling dark squares, and here white can very easily get a very strong advantage by taking over here. And if I take, that's queen takes, king to h8, and this is a very strong position for white here. White can continue to play knight to h3, defending the bishop, and continue to play moves like knight to d5 and get in very quickly. I think maybe even knight h3 is not needed. You can play knight to d5 first, but to be safe, knight h3 is always nice, and you can bring another attacker in sometime soon as well. But fortunately for me, this was not found. Instead, after knight to e8, knight to h3 was played because they didn't want to hang the bishop, and here I took the opportunity to play d5. So I've consolidated, and now I'm ready to continue my plan of attacking. So ace3 here was played. I don't think that was really necessary. I think that's a weakening move because now that helps my plan of playing knight to a5. And after I get my knight to c4, these two pawns are kind of fixed by my knight here. It's a common pattern. So queen to f3, I'm not too sure what the idea is, because it doesn't really attack anything. My guess would be something, I don't know, actually I don't really know. I have no idea. Maybe something like queen to g3 or something like that. Yeah, I don't really know what's the idea of that, but it presents me with an opportunity to win material because this bishop is now pinned to this queen here. And the easiest way to exploit this is by playing g5, which is objectively the best move. However, during the game I contemplated whether or not I should just ignore this since it's a time wasting move and I can use the time gain to actually go for an attack on the queen side instead, which would be a much more risk-free approach. However, for the sake of practicing calculation and all that, I decided to play g5 and accept the challenge to win a piece. But here Isaiah surprised me with the move bishop to e3, giving me a queen for the rook. So of course I happily took it instantly, and now I decided to go ahead with my plan of attacking. So play knight to c4 over here, continue with my plan, fixing the pawn structure. f4 was played to defend the pawn. I think I just continue with my plan of attacking. Takes, and here I should have probably taken the e5 pawn because the e5 pawn, although it doesn't seem like much, actually does a lot to my king safety. It blocks a lot of squares that my pieces can gain access to. As I mentioned earlier, all my pieces are controlling the dark squares, and this e5 pawn is doing a very good job of limiting my control and blunting my control. Here I decide to take back with the pawn. It doesn't really matter which I take back with either way. Rook to g1, trying to harm me. Here again, I should have taken the pawn, but instead I decided to very greedily fork once again because I thought that after bishop takes or anything like that, I would be completely fine. And I'm right, I'm completely fine, but it's not as good, not as fine as if I just took the pawn. It would be much better if I just took the pawn. I can always return back anyway if needed, and then I can just threaten this again. So instead, after the fork, I gave black enough time to capture. Here I should just step out of the way with something like king to f7. If takes, I can just take back and I can run to the queen side where it's safe. But however, here I foolishly played bishop takes, which is still okay for me, but it's a lot more dangerous. I thought this was fine because it comes with check. But after knight takes, I realized that I didn't really gain any tempo. Instead, I'm the one who has to run now, and I have to be very careful because this knight here is threatening to discover itself against my queen over here. And my king can't really move because if I move here, then this is a fork and a discovered fork. Here, same thing, it's a fork. And if I go here, this is also a discovered fork, so I can't move my king. And if I carelessly move my queen somewhere, I have to be very careful not to get checkmated as well. So instead, I decided to move my queen as far away as possible. In hindsight, I should have seen that knight takes e6 was going to be played either way, because it restricts the most squares away from my king, and it comes with a discovered check. It's a free pawn, so why not? And with that, the knight would be coming over to these two squares. So instead of playing queen to a5, I should have played something like queen to b6 instead, so that in the case of knight to e6, I can just calmly play king to f7, and I'm completely fine here because there is no rook check and the knight has to move, so giving me enough time to actually take the knight over here. But instead, I developed I pushed my queen as far away as possible while maintaining some attacking chances. I was just thinking that, you know what, there's not really a lot of counterplay. I can just walk away and I'll be fine, right? But I was very much mistaken. Instead, after knight takes here with check from the rook, this was the only move pretty much. I think maybe this was also a possibility, but I didn't want to allow some doubling and cause more complications that way. I underestimated the fact that knight takes c5 will also allow this pawn to fall. So with knight takes c5, I have to be very careful once again, because if I simply take the knight over here, I believe this is force mate. After rook to d7, king to f8 is the only move, and then now knight to e6 is checkmate. I have to be very, very careful over here. I cannot take the knight. Also, another trap that I have to be careful of is if I decide to play something like rook to d8 to defend. There is actually this fork over here winning back more material, and then I'll be down material instead, and with a very exposed king. So ultimately, I decided to play rook to a7, defending the 7th rank. I don't need to worry about any skewers because my knight is always defending that square. However, here, yeah, white manages to regain the pawn, and now we are equal in material, and I'm in a much worse position because I have a very exposed king and my pieces are very not harmonious. And e6 is always a threat, hence why I should have taken the pawn earlier. Here I blundered terribly with b4. I should have probably just taken the pawn here, because I missed the fact that after b4, my idea happened in the game because fortunately for me, Isaiah wasn't 2000 rated and couldn't take advantage of my blunder. But the idea of b4 is, let's say if a takes b4, then I have check. This is the only move, and I have check here, and then I'll win the rook. Here I'll win the knight. I'll win the rook as well. So this was in the position. However, of course, you don't have to take the pawn. Another idea was that if you take the knight, as it has happened in the game, I will be able to trade pieces, and then with lesser pieces over the board, my queen will be stronger. But unfortunately for me, there's actually a very strong move over here, which is e6. I thought this would be fine, because after king to e7, it looks like there is nothing else, and I can take the knight. However, I have completely forgotten that white has initiative here by playing knight to d5 over here, pushing my king away, and then threatening some very nasty stuff. Directly after the game, I was also worried that there might have been some rook to d7 ideas, where after if I take, threatens my knight, so I have to move my knight away somewhere. Let's say I move my knight here maybe, so that it's defended by the other knight. Then there might be this in some cases, preparing to maybe promote and stuff like that, yeah. So this might have been also very dangerous as well. But fortunately for me, after b4, rook takes, this check was played, but knight to d5 wasn't found. Instead, rook takes, I was able to trade my pieces, at the expense of one pawn. So now white is up a pawn, but I have this move here, rook to c7, and it looks very natural for white to simply just I don't know move the knight away and then just give back just trade pieces and be happy with the extra pawn. But the queen will be able to exert its influence and be able to win more material very very quickly if that was the case. Another very natural move which was played in the game was b4, but here I have a very nice move which is rook takes c5. Oh no, my queen. Oh wait, I think I'm disconnected. Campus Wi-Fi, Just wait a moment. Sorry about that. I'll take this opportunity to hydrate. Hey, we're back. So rook takes c5 is also objectively the best move. In the case where the rook is taken, I'll be able to recapture the rook and I'll be up a knight and a queen for rook, and I'll be threatening to win the other rook as well. So very very dangerous. If rook takes here, I'll be able to win a lot of material as well. If king to b1, I'll win the rook this way. If king here, I'll be able to win the rook this way. And if king to d2, I'll be able to win the rook this way. So this was a calculated queen, quote unquote queen sack. But actually, I'm just on material because after the queen is taken, I can just recapture the rook, and now I'm up a knight. Of course, this knight is at the expense of what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns. So material-wise, white is up 2 pawns, but pieces are much better than these stray pawns, and I'll be able to collect the pawns very very quickly. So after, for example, rook there, preparing to defend the pass pawn that way, you can just pick up all the pawns. We are both under time pressure, under a minute here, so the moves were played pretty much very very quickly, and then it was just a routine ladder mate at some point. So I won biggest white flag, and this was the end of the game, and I managed to win both of my matches today. However, it wasn't easy. I definitely didn't play very very well. I have to practice more, especially with time trouble, since I lost one game today because I was moving too slowly. So yeah, that's all for today, and see you all in the next video.